What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Amy Nixon. Today is September 21st, 2022. And I want to take a moment to let y'all know like and subscribe to the channel. We're growing a lot lately. And today we're going to be talking baseball. So, joining me from Austin, Texas, the Stat King himself, Michael Lean. What's up?
What is up, everybody? Welcome back. Good evening. Live from Austin, Texas. Emmy live from his apartment at Bethany College. We're back for episode 123. And today, as we have not done in a while, we're going to be talking a lot of baseball. The reason being is because we are just about 2 weeks away from the AL wildcard series beginning. That will happen, I believe, October 7th. Remember, this year's playoffs, they're going to be expanded. So we're going to get two wild card best of three series in each league, American League and um, National League. So it'll be four best of three series over a span of 3 days before we move on to the divisional series. And two teams get byes. And right now, it's looking like it's going to be the Yankees and the Astros, respectively, in the American League. And then I believe it's the Dodgers and the Mets right now in the National League. But that could very well change. And we're going to talk about what's going on in the NL East here a little bit later as the Braves have gotten hot once again down the stretch. Yeah, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to have some fun, and let's talk some baseball as we're getting near the playoffs.
Yeah, we're just going to start off with some AL MVP discussion. Um, Obviously, the headliners, Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani. But for you as a Yankees fan, what do you think about the race right now?
Well, it's been a hot topic, especially the past week or two, as in case, for those of you who don't know, Judge is approaching history. He is, and he has been he's been on pace pretty much the entire season. But it's just gotten to that point where he's he's on the brink of breaking the single season home run record for an American League player, which was set back in 1961 by Roger Maris, who was another famous Yankee, with 61 home runs that season. And for people who are really into baseball, the baseball purists who consider the real records of Barry Bonds, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, those seasons to be invalid because of steroids. You could really make the argument that the real home run record is Roger Maris's 61 if you exclude those guys because of steroids. And so some people are saying that if Judge gets this record, he's the all-time single-season home run leader. But some people obviously disagree with that. But that's not what we're here to argue. What we're here to argue is who should win, who is the rightful winner of this year's American League MVP. And not only that, is it actually that close of a race right now? So I actually want to hear your thoughts first, and then I'll give my thoughts because I have a lot of stats, but I don't want to talk for too long here. So I'll give you an opportunity to speak for yourself first.
Well, I'll just start out by saying this. As good as Shohei Ohtani is, he's done everything he could possibly do. It's just um, we talk about this a lot with the NBA's MVP race. The narrative matters, and there isn't really a much better narrative than being close to breaking a home run record like Aaron Judge is right now. So, obviously, what Otani does, extremely, pitching and batting at time. Uh, but even so, uh, 60 home runs, have, as you said, 2 weeks left in the season, and like he's going to breeze through this record, just get close to 8, if I were to guess. So I think it's Aaron Judge, and it's not really Otani's fault. I think in most years a season of his caliber would be enough to win the MVP, but the fact that his team is 19 games under 500 or whatever it is, and the fact that you know Aaron Judge is about to break this record. I mean, it's really hard to deny.
Coming into this season, I don't know if we said it in particular, but lots of people said, and the general sentiment around baseball itself was that considering what we witnessed last year with Otani, the I don't remember exactly how many home runs it was, but the 49 home runs or whatever it was, the historic season that he had, which resulted in him winning the MVP. People said coming into this season, it's going to take a absolutely historic season from somebody else to unseat him for American League MVP just because of the value he provides. He pitches every 5 days and he hits. He hits for power. He steals bases. He does everything. Um, and look, we knew that was going to be tough. We knew there were some great candidates. I mean, considering what we saw Vladimir Guerrero Jr. do last year in the American League, I mean, he was a candidate coming in with the season we expected the Blue Jays to have. Consider they're still having a really good year. They're just not having the year we expected them to. Um, and then Aaron Judge, of course. Um, and look, that's what we've gotten. We've gotten an absolutely historic season by a player that not only um, is, and I'll get into the statistics in a second, is doing everything aside from just hitting home runs, but he's actually on a premier team in baseball, which was on a historic pace through the first half of the season. And he actually leads the MLB in WAR, or the all important metric, wins above replacement. And that's impressive considering that even when you combine Otani's offensive metrics with with his pitching metrics, they still don't add up to what Judge is doing. So, with that, all that being said, and again, as you said, it's not a knock on Otani. He's absolutely still probably the greatest player in our game, and he is like he's a peer by himself. Like in most seasons, he's winning this award, but this year, I think with the Angels sort of out of it, already eliminated from playoff contention. Not all that, of course, is Otani's fault. But just I think Judge is the bigger story right now. And the narrative, as you mentioned, with Judge turning down that $230 million deal contract extension from the Yankees, it was a completely fair offer. It was going to make Judge the highest paid um, Yankee by average annual value from year to year, what he's making year to year in New York Yankees history. It was a completely fair offer from a Yankee perspective. But Judge turned that down and said, "Hey, I'm going to bet on myself." And man, has it worked out. If you just look at the baseline, and we'll go a little bit deeper here in a minute, Aaron Judge leads all of Major League Baseball, not just the American League, in runs scored with 125. That's times he's touched home plate, rounded the bases, and touched home plate. Home runs, as you of course know, he leads that by a lot, 60 home runs. RBIs, 128. He's comfortably leading there as well. On base percentage, a 421 on base percentage, which means 42% of the time he gets in that bat, he's getting on base, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
A 701 slugging percentage, which basically it's slugging percentage. It's a hard statistic to explain. It's basically takes into account how often you're hitting for extra bases. So whether it's a double, a triple, or a home run, it's everything but singles, if that makes sense. Um, how hard are you hitting the baseball? That sort of thing. He leads in that category. 700 slugging percentage. I mean, if he maintains that through the last 2 weeks of the season, he'll be the first player to do that since Barry Bonds back in 2001. He leads in OPS, which is basically just the 421 plus the 701, or whatever his slugging percentage is. On base plus slugging is OPS, a 1.26. That's like historic. Extra base hits, doubles, triples, home runs. He's got 87 of those. And then WAR, a 10.7 WAR, wins above replacement. Not to mention, he also leads the American League in batting average. So not only is he just running into home runs every once in a while, and he's on an historic pace for home runs, not only is he being productive, driving in runs, but he's hitting for average too. A 317 average, which leads the American League. And on the pace that he's going at in September, he could very well lead the entire league in batting average when it's all said and done. So he could lead the entire league in batting average, home runs, RBIs, OPS, slugging percentage, and on base percentage, and WAR. And I think he'd be the first player ever to do all of that. But regardless, he's on track to win the Triple Crown for the American League. He'd be the first player since Miguel Cabrera all the way back in 2012, and only the second player since 1967 to win the Triple Crown, which is basically, for those of you who don't know, it's when you lead your respective league, the National League or the American League, in the three major offensive stats: batting average, RBIs, and home runs. So he could do that as well. And he could also get the triple slash line, which is where you lead your respective league in on base percentage, slugging, and OPS. So he could get all of those things all in one season. So, man, has it been fun to watch as a Yankees fan. It's no slight to Ohtani, but this is arguably one of the greatest individual single season offensive seasons we've seen in the history of baseball, period. During the month of September, and I'm almost finished, this does not include tonight. This was after last night's game. But tonight he was absolutely fantastic again. He did not hit a home run, but he had two doubles. But after last night, in September, 71 plate appearances, a 491 batting average. Considering it's September 22nd already. They've already played, 15, 20 games in the month of September. He's batting 491, close to 500. A 586 on base percentage. A 1.018 slugging percentage. Not an OPS, a slugging percentage of 1.018. A 1.604 OPS. 8 home runs, 14 RBIs, and a 20% walk percentage. All elite numbers. And in his last 55 games, so basically 2 months after last night's game, He's been batting .389 with a .520 on base, an .881 slugging, and a 28 home runs. Players to do that in a 55 game span, to have those numbers that I just mentioned, a .389 or better batting average, a .520 or better on base percentage, an .880 or better slugging percentage, and 28 home runs or more in a span of 55 games. It's Babe Ruth and it's Aaron Judge in the history of baseball. So I could keep going. If you want more stats, I can definitely keep going. But I think I rest my case there.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we call you the Stat King, man. It's the stats speak for themselves. I mean, there's nothing more you can really say. I mean, he's just been unbelievable, and for someone like myself who doesn't watch a ton of baseball, like I had this, you know, category in my head of where I saw Aaron Judge being, like in terms of the best players in baseball. Like I kind of like for a while I always kind of saw him as, a home run hitter who was never really that efficient, would strike out a lot, but I mean, something flipped and he's been incredible this season.
Absolutely. Um, so we'll see what happens with the vote, and we're probably going to talk about this again when the numbers are all said and done, the season's over, and we, you know, come circle around back around to this topic. But man, it's just hard to deny. As we said at the beginning of the season, what Judge has done. He's having an historic season. And look, they announced today that over the course of the next couple days, Yankees are starting their final series of the year against the Boston Red Sox, who, albeit, are pretty much out of the playoff race at this point. But it's still Yankees Red Sox. They're playing 4-game series this weekend at Yankee Stadium. And during every Aaron Judge at bat, they're going to do live cut-ins to the Yankees game, so that people watching ESPN at that time can see the possibility of Judge making history. That's just how big this is. So, and man, will it be add more to it if he does it against Boston.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. But all that being said, and this is a different topic for another day, can Judge do this in the playoffs? That's the next question. And that's, I think, a question where if we're going to talk about contract with the Yankees, a possible contract extension after the season is over with the Yankees, I think the Yankees want to see this continue into the postseason. And if he does it there, then that's where I think you're going to see the Yankees really go hard after him. But if he doesn't, if he flops in the playoffs, and I'm not saying he's flopped in the past, he's actually been pretty good, but he hasn't been like this, like MVP good in the playoffs yet. So I think the Yankees want to see some of this go into the playoffs before they really pay up for Judge. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day.
Right. Yeah. But with that, we will go ahead and move on to our second topic. And we're just going to talk about the AL wildcard race. Right now, as it currently sits, the Blue Jays have a 2-game lead over the Seattle Mariners, who I believe have like a 20-year playoff drought, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and then following them is the Tampa Bay Rays at 82 and 67. So the question we have on the docket here is who's a real threat out of these three teams? What do you think?
It's interesting. You're going to have the Seattle Mariners, who are going to make the playoffs for the first time since 2001. They're going to break the longest playoff drought of any major professional sports team, which good for them. Absolutely. I think we sort of predicted this going into this season, considering that they won 90 games last year, and they added last year's Cy Young winner and Robbie Ray to that rotation that has some very good young arms like Logan Gilbert and others. And then they, of course, have who will eventually be named the AL Rookie of the Year, most likely, Julio Rodriguez, he's continued to be absolutely fantastic the second half of the season after almost winning the home run derby at the All-Star break. Then you have the Rays, who sort of they were hot. Now they're really not. They've run into an Astros team that's about to sweep them at the Trop, which is where they play at home. And they've fallen to that. In the process, they've fallen to that third wild card spot, that last spot. I think they're pretty safe considering with 2 weeks to go, they're 4.5 games ahead of the Blue Jays, or not the Blue Jays, the Orioles, who, I mean, that's another story for another race. They've won 77 games, which I don't think anyone expected them to even eclipse that mark. But yeah, I think the scary part with the Rays is not going to be their offense. They have some nice pieces there. Wander Franco, who's been on and off hurt, but he's their young shortstop prospect who's been really good when he's been healthy. Manny Margot, Yandy Diaz is a machine at driving in runs when runners are in scoring position. The Rays are the Rays. They're going to raise you. They're going to be sort of unconventional when you watch them in the playoffs. Kevin Cash has a really good feel for using that bullpen and using his pitching staff in a way that can navigate those certain lanes of dangerous hitters in the postseason. I think we've seen that in the past. They've found ways to beat you, whether it's starting a guy like Shane McClanahan, who's in the AL Cy Young race right now. He's been one of the best pitchers in the American League. He's sort of their ace per se. Or whether it's just going with an opener, a guy for 1 or 2 innings, and then using that bullpen for the rest of the game. The Rays have their different ways of sort of getting in your head and manipulating you from a pitching perspective. And that's what scares me about the Rays. If they're on with their pitching, even though their offense isn't real prolific, they could find ways to really make it difficult for you. I think they probably have the second or third best, most trusted pitching rotation in the American League right now. So from an offensive perspective, I don't know that they really put real fear into me as like a Yankees fan or you as an Astros fan. I'm not sure they should strike real fear into anybody, but that pitching staff, their experience, and the way Kevin Cash uses their pitchers, it can get scary if you don't figure out a way to jump on them early. But they really don't put much fear into me until they show me that they can really go that extra step offensively. And when you consider that in the playoffs, you're facing the best of the best in terms of pitching, we're going to have to see. So given Seattle's inexperience, I know they're young and fun, but given their inexperience and some of the troubles that they've had and inconsistencies that they've had within their starting pitching rotation, and given that everything I just said about Tampa Bay's offense, I do think even though the Blue Jays bullpen doesn't really, it shouldn't give you any warm feelings if you're a Blue Jays fan. That offense, I mean, Springer has done it before. Guerrero Jr. is obviously dangerous. Bo Bichette is having a September that doesn't quite rival what Judge is doing, but he's having an absolutely fantastic month of September. He's gotten hot. Teoscar Hernandez, the list goes on and on. What that offense can do, plus what Alek Manoah has been doing at the top of that starting rotation, I think I like the Blue Jays as my biggest threat. But the Rays, if they can show me more from that pitching staff, also scare me.
Yeah. For me, I think it's hard for me to trust the Mariners quite yet. Um, I it's hard to really know because I don't watch much of the Mariners really since they're so far on the West Coast. But um, for me personally, the two things that I see from teams that go deep in the playoffs in Major League Baseball is just um, how good are your aces when they're in there? Like, can you win those games when you have your aces starting? And that paired with can you get clutch hitting? Um, and the Rays, they've made deep playoff runs before. I think they're certainly capable of it, but I think consistency is going to be the biggest thing. I just don't know if in a 7-game series they're going to get enough offense um, to really challenge, a Astros team or a Yankees team. Um, and then the Blue Jays, I mean, as you said, their lineup can go, head to head with anybody in baseball. And whenever you have a lineup that's stacked, I mean, you're going to have a chance to win every single game. You're going to have a chance to win because um, if you can score runs in bunches, you're never out of a game. And that's a rare weapon to have, especially for a team sitting in a wild card spot. So I think I'm going to have to agree with you. I'm going to say the Blue Jays. Um, but I think it's also because I'm a little bit biased. I don't really know much about the Mariners. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna shy away from that. I'm just gonna openly admit it. I really don't know much about the Mariners. So
That's fair. And look, the Mariners. I mean, we've seen teams before make make runs, and if they are firing on all cylinders, they could certainly do it. I think it's for the Mariners all going to depend on the matchup. And in a 3-game wild card series, where number one you're going to be pitching your best from the jump start. I think um, it's going to be a matter of whether they can, with a lot of the young players they have in their lineup, hit situationally against the best of the best that they're going to be facing. And I do think home field will also be a factor in that as well. Um, so I think it's circumstance based for the Mariners, who they get matched up against, that sort of thing, that will determine their ultimate viability within the American League. Um, but at the same time, the Blue Jays are a prolific offensive team. Even their catcher, Alejandro Kirk, was an all star this season and has been having a fantastic year. So their lineup really goes when everyone's healthy. It really goes pretty much top to bottom, just like the Astros has a they have a deep lineup. The Yankees, of course, when they're healthy, have a pretty deep lineup, and so forth. I think the Blue Jays, with what they can do offensively, really should put fear into a lot of the teams moving forward, particularly the Yankees or the Astros. And then the Rays, they have the experience factor here, which I certainly think plays a role in their pitching, along with their manager knows how to navigate these type of situations. But there are questions of offensively whether they can do enough. We know they could probably do enough 1 or 2 games here or there, but as you said, in a 5-game divisional series or a 7-game ALCS, a 7-game World Series, do they have enough on a consistent basis? That's going to be the question. So I think it's the Blue Jays, but that's not to say that I think the Blue Jays are, you know, surefire pick to go deep into the playoffs because their bullpen is a whole other story for another day.
right. Yeah. Um, okay. Our next topic, um, I believe, is just a discussion about the two teams who are about to break major playoff droughts: the Phillies and the Mariners. Who do you
Right.
think will go farther in October?
See, this is a tough question because, as you mentioned, both teams are looking to break major playoff droughts. The Phillies, first time since I believe it's 2011, 2012. And then, of course, the Mariners, 2001, 2004, or 2001, 2002. Um, the Phillies, they've gotten healthy recently. They actually just beat the Blue Jays tonight. Bryce Harper's back from an injury. He's playing well. They, of course, have Kyle Schwarber, who is second right now in the league in home runs, although he trails Judge by 40. I mean, 20. 40 would be insane. 20. He has 40, is what I meant to say. He's trailing Judge by 20. Um, some other guys mixed in there, Gene Segura, et cetera, et cetera. My question for the Phillies is, what do we get from that pitching staff? We know Zach Wheeler's really good. We know some other guys that they have. I don't know them off the top of my head. But what do we get from that pitching staff? Sometimes it's really good. Sometimes it's eh. Um, and with what you're staring down right now in the National League, having to face, offenses like, the Mets, the Braves, the Dodgers, uh, even the Brewers, or not the Brewers. The Cardinals. I think the Brewers are out of the playoff race right now. Or even the Padres if they get in. Um, that's a tough task. That's a tall task for a pitching staff that's been highly inconsistent. Um, then from a Mariners perspective, it's kind of the same thing, but I do think with the arms that the Mariners have and the offense that they have, I think I got to say the Mariners, but that's just a gut feeling. I
Yeah,
like the Mariners pitching a little bit better than I do the Phillies.
yeah, I think I'm with you on that. The Mariners, to me, just have a little bit more pop to them, I guess. Um, and like I said earlier, I really don't know much about them other than Julio Rodriguez, who when I watched the home run derby, I mean that dude's a stud. Um, that's all I really know about him, and I mean, yeah, there's really not much I can really say, but I think you made some pretty good points there. But are you cool? Just move on here, or
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is Logan Gilbert for the Mariners. If you haven't watched him, he's probably their number two starter in the playoffs. He's young. Um, he's been really good this season. Uh, a couple days ago, he pitched 6 innings, only allowed one earned run, and had 12 strikeouts. So he's got some disgusting stuff. And with Robbie Ray, who's already kind of been through this once now, as your ace, uh, um, you know, I, it, and I like the Toronto bullpen a lot better, or not Toronto, Seattle's bullpen a lot better than I do Phillies. So it's just kind of a trust factor in their pitching staff with some of the young arms that they have, um, and not I've even forgot Luis Castillo, who was the ace of the Cincinnati Reds, who the Mariners acquired at the trading deadline. They have him as well, so that's a 1-2-3 of Robbie Ray, Luis Castillo, and Logan Gilbert. And I like that over pretty much anyone except maybe the Astros and maybe the Dodgers in a 3-game playoff series, to be honest with you.
yeah, that is a pretty good triple threat right there. But we will move on to our next topic, um, and that is just discussing who do we trust more in the playoffs? The Mets, who uh, last couple years have had their injury struggles, but this year have been really really good and consistent throughout the whole season, or the Atlanta Braves, the defending champs, who right now are one of the hottest teams in baseball. What do you think?
Well, both of them are hot. The Braves a little hotter than the Mets right now, but the Mets have won 90 games for the first time since 2006. Um, so they're going to make the playoffs. And the Braves coming off the World Series last year brought a lot of those same guys back. They extended their all-star third baseman Austin Riley, who's absolutely a stud. One of the more underrated players in baseball, if you ask me. And their pitching staff has gotten healthy, and I think they've added some nice experience in the back end of that bullpen, which is really what matters in the playoffs. Bringing it over a guy who's been there, done that, closed World Series games, closed high leverage playoff games in his career, a bunch of them. And Kenley Jansen, they brought him over from the Dodgers. And they still have a lot of good arms in the back end of that bullpen. However, even though their offense with Acuna, who they actually, believe it or not, did not have pretty much all of last year's playoffs because of the ACL injury that he suffered midway through last season. They're going to have him this year. So you can make the argument that with the additions in the back end of their bullpen, adding Acuna to what they already had, even though they did lose Freddie Freeman, we got to acknowledge that as well. But they did replace Freddie Freeman with another all-star caliber first baseman in Matt Olson, who's basically doing comparable things to what Freddie Freeman's been doing with the Dodgers. Um, I think when you consider that they've basically replaced pretty much most of the production of Freddie Freeman at the first base position, they're getting all-star level production from the third baseman, Austin Riley. They have a good defense all across the board with Acuna. Adding him back into this lineup with a more experienced back into the bullpen, I think you could make the argument that the Braves are better than they were last year going into the playoffs. And they have a better shot this year and a better team this year to go deeper and maybe even repeat as World Series champions. But there are two differentiating factors for me right now. Number one, it was just announced that their second baseman, Ozzy Albies, is going to miss the rest of the season due to an injury. I don't know the specifics of the injury, but he's going to miss it. I think it's a broken bone somewhere. I don't remember where. And then number two, when I look at the starting pitching with the Mets, with DeGrom and Scherzer at the top of that rotation, I'm not sure anyone can match that. And then with their closer, Edwin Diaz, I'm sure you've seen the videos of his entrance with the music playing. I'm sorry if you're in a playoff game, in a playoff environment at Citi Field, and he comes into the game and that music's playing, and you're up to bat, the game is over. You're not Edwin Diaz has probably been the best closer in baseball this year. Your your chances are slim at that point to come back and win. So considering they have an all-world closer, all-world starting pitching with DeGrom and Scherzer, and an offense that is prolific, I think at this point I have to edge with the Mets, even though the Braves have the experience and they could be even better than they were last year.
Yeah, this one's super tough. It's hard for me to pick against, the defending champs, but I think I'm with you on the Mets. I mean, having Scherzer and DeGrom as your two aces. I mean, Obviously, we talked about how the Mariners have three guys, but these two guys for the Mets are just a different level. I mean, these are two guys who have consistently been, I mean, top five in the league in Scherzer's case, almost a decade, I think.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, just crazy consistency and just um, on their way to a Hall of Fame for sure. But those are two guys you can trust in the playoffs, and with the lineup they have, um, it really frees them up to just do what they do, and it really takes the pressure off the offense when you have those two guys.
absolutely. One thing I will say though is we haven't really seen Jacob DeGrom pitch in the playoffs before.
Yeah,
We saw it a long time ago. We've seen it with Scherzer. We know Scherzer's going to be fine, but we have not really seen it from Jacob DeGrom. So this is not me doubting his ability to do it, get the job done. He's an elite pitcher. There's no doubt about that. It's a small doubt in the back of your mind, I think. If not only
yeah,
if you're a Mets fan, but just in general, if you're gonna really bet on the Mets to go far in the playoffs, if for whatever reason DeGrom isn't Jacob DeGrom or he doesn't live up to the Jacob DeGrom name in the playoffs, that's where we could get into a little muddy area with the Mets. But other than that, I think with that offense, with what they added at the trade deadline, and a guy like Daniel Vogelback he's sort of, you may have seen videos of him before. He's sort of like the fatter, chubbier guy who hits bombs. Um, Actually, there are a lot of those in baseball, but he's one of those guys who does that sort of thing. He's sort of like their Energizer Bunny in their middle of the lineup, along with Lindor, the Polar Bear, Jeff McNeil, and others. Um, Considering the fact that, as I mentioned, Ozzy Albies is out for the rest of the year. Look, the Braves overcame an injury last season. Maybe they'll do it again, but I just think it's so hard to repeat, as it is in all sports, pretty much. And I think the Mets, given that they have Scherzer and DeGrom, I mean, that's a huge advantage come playoff time. Huge.
yeah, exactly. Okay, let's see here. Our next topic, I think it's our second to last topic of the night.
Yeah,
Um, on the St. Louis Cardinals. Um, do you think they're being overlooked as being a possible contender?
I do. Um, a couple of reasons why. I won't go too deep into this. I know we're trying to keep this to about an hour or so. Number one, this doesn't really apply to their playoff aspirations to go deep in October, but Albert Pujols, what he's been doing, the chase for, there's not one home run chase going on in baseball. There's actually two. Pujols is chasing 700, which is an atmosphere that not a lot of players have touched in baseball history. 700 career home runs. He just recently, as of like last week, passed A-Rod for fourth all time in home runs. He's at 698 right now. He's two away from 700. He's got about 14, 15 games left to hit two more. Just like Judge has about 14 games left to hit two more to break the AL single season record. So what he's been doing, especially since the All-Star break, hitting home runs at a pretty good rate, has been something to watch, a storyline in baseball. But when you look at this Cardinals team, you of course have the trio of veterans, right? Pujols, Yadier Molina. What are you laughing at? And Adam Wainwright. And then, you know, I think the production that they're getting from their corner infielders, Paul Goldschmidt probably going to win the NL MVP at first base, and then Nolan Arenado playing Gold Glove defense and producing at an all-star level offensively from third base. Given what they do from a defensive perspective, they're one of the best fielding teams in baseball, so they're not going to make a lot of errors defensively, which is in turn going to hurt their pitching staff. Getting a guy like Jordan Montgomery, who's a solid arm at the back end of that rotation, who's been pitching fantastic ever since he got traded from the Yankees to the Cardinals. I think they have a really well-rounded team. I think people are sleeping on them just because like they're tucked away, sort of in the middle of nowhere in St. Louis. But I think a lot of the pieces they have with the season Paul Goldschmidt's having, they're sort of being overlooked in a way.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think um, they've been building towards this for the past couple of years. They've been kind of, I wouldn't really call it a rebuild, but they've been kind of reloading. Obviously, with the huge trade they made last year with Nolan Arenado, getting him from the Colorado Rockies. Um, I mean that team is always super um, defensive minded, um, and as a guy who has a soft spot for the Texas Rangers,
Yeah, we know what you mean.
they're always in the back of my head.
Yeah, we know what you mean. All right, so with that, and we'll listen, guys. We're gonna talk. We're gonna dive deeper once we actually know the playoff matchups, uh, and once we're talking about the actual playoffs. But for right now, let's just move on to our last topic of the day. What is it?
It's which which potential playoff team has the best starting pitching staff?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
For me personally, from what I've seen, if we're talking about depth, starting rotation, and bullpen, I think it probably comes down to three teams: the Astros, the Dodgers, and the Mets. When you look at each of the three teams respectively, the Dodgers, as we know, Kershaw, Bueller, the list, Urias, the list goes on and on. Um, Dustin May, who's coming back. I mean, they've got all their ducks in a row ready to go. We've seen it year after year in the playoffs. We know what that presents. Uh, as we mentioned earlier, DeGrom and Scherzer, with guys like Taiwan Walker and guys in their bullpen, like Edwin Diaz at the back end, I think the Mets are viable, although we haven't seen DeGrom in a playoff environment uh, a whole lot. But I think it's the Astros, man. I think we've seen it year after year. The Astros continually. I think this is what separates them from the Yankees right now. Usually, I would say it's contact hitting, situational hitting, that sort of thing. But I think it's that rotation. I mean, Framber Valdez. I can't remember the name. Justin Verlander having a Cy Young season at the age of 40. Um, it, the list goes up and down. I have to pull up the names to remember them, but you probably know better than I do. Um, I think what the Astros have done, given that they've proven it year after year after year, they're probably my leader in the clubhouse as a trusted starting pitching rotation.
Yeah, it's hard for me to really fault that. Yeah, I mean, um, I think the Astros they've had a deep farm system of pitching for a long time. Um, my roommates are trolling me. Okay. I'm gonna leave that in. I'm not gonna edit that out. Okay. I don't even know what I was talking about now. Um,
You're talking about the
yeah, the
Astros.
Astros. Um, I'm so thrown off right now. You can talk. Go ahead. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
you're talking about the farm system that they've had. I mean, again, Lance McCullers Jr., Jose Urquidy. I've pulled up their roster. McCullers Jr., Jose Urquidy, Luis Garcia, uh, the guys I mentioned earlier, Verlander at the top of that rotation with Framber Valdez. I mean, that's 1 through 5 right there. So I'll leave it at that. I think the Astros, until proven otherwise, that pitching rotation, that's what teams like the Blue Jays and the Yankees have to fight through if they want to get where they want to go.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But that's gonna do it for today, guys. My Not only are my roommates trolling me, but my computer screen is like completely frozen. So I don't even know if like my camera is good on your end, but like I can hear you fine, the connection team's fine, but my computer like is not responding at all. So I actually don't know how I'm gonna end this stream without just like shutting off my computer. So um, we'll see y'all most likely tomorrow for our picks podcast for the NFL week
Right.
3. And yeah, stay tuned for that. And I'm gonna let Michael sign us off.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be all right on your end. You're moving completely fine. Your camera is completely fine from my perspective. Uh, but yeah, I think we'll be fine as long as you can safely end the live stream. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in. We kept this to a good 55 minutes, which I think is a good length considering we had what 7 topics, 6 topics, and I went on and on about Aaron Judge. So yeah, we'll be talking about the playoffs when they come around. But be sure to tune in tomorrow for our second week of picks. We did not do so hot this past week.
Yeah.
It was rough. So hopefully the only way is up from here. But yeah, NFL Week 3 starts tomorrow. Steelers Browns should be an interesting game, I think. And then we'll be making our picks for, and we'll probably react to that game just like we did last week on the live stream for a little bit, and then we'll do college football Week 4 and NFL Week 3 picks. But until then, just like Emmy's chances of not getting trolled by people in his apartment, we are gone.
Peace. If I can end this live stream, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, man. Oh my god.
Oh man, what a
I don't know
podcast!
what to do. Oh my god.
Oh shit!
Dude, I don't know what to do.
This is just going to be included at the end of the live stream.
Yeah, I don't know what to do, man. I think I'm just gonna have to unplug everything and just hope it ends. I don't know. If this just goes to black and it just lasts forever, then you'll know why. Peace
Yeah.
out.
All right. Well, it is what it is.
Oh.